Imagine a country whose public debt is more than 2.5 times the size of its entire economy. In most cases, economists would expect such a country to face a severe financial crisis, collapsing markets, or even a sovereign debt default. Yet this country remains one of the most stable and technologically advanced economies in the world. Today on Hero Insight, we explore one of the most fascinating paradoxes in modern economics, Japan, an economy that seems permanently suspended between growth and stagnation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hero Insight. When people think about Japan, they usually imagine a country defined by precision and discipline, advanced technology, world-class manufacturing, spotless cities, and an incredibly dedicated workforce. Japan was once considered an unstoppable economic powerhouse, but today, the reality looks very different.
Exactly. And here lies the puzzle. If Japan is still so developed and technologically advanced, why does it have the highest public debt to GDP ratio in the world, over 250%? How can such an economy remain stable for decades?
To understand this paradox, we first need to understand what public debt actually means. Public debt is the money a government borrows when tax revenues are not enough to cover national spending. Governments borrow to build infrastructure, fund healthcare systems, support welfare programs, and stabilize the economy during crises. Thailand also has public debt for national development, but Japan's case is fundamentally different from most countries.
The key difference lies in who holds the debt. Many countries borrow heavily from foreign investors. Japan, however, borrows mostly from its own citizens. Japanese households have historically saved enormous amounts of money, and those savings are invested into government bonds. In other words, Japan's public debt is largely money the country owes to itself. But to understand how this system emerged, we have to go back to a critical turning point in 1985, the Plaza Accord.
At the time, Japanese exports were dominating global markets. Japanese cars, electronics, and machinery were flooding into the United States and Europe. As a result, the United States was running a massive trade deficit with Japan. To correct this imbalance, the U.S. and several major economies agreed to coordinate currency markets in order to push the Japanese yen sharply higher.
The rapid appreciation of the yen made Japanese exports far more expensive overseas. To protect the domestic economy, the Bank of Japan drastically lowered interest rates, but that decision unintentionally triggered one of the largest financial bubbles in modern economic history.
The bubble first appeared in the real estate market. Banks aggressively issued loans using land as collateral. As land prices increased, people borrowed even more money to purchase additional properties for speculation. The more prices rose, the more people believed they would continue rising forever.
The speculative fever soon spread into the stock market. In 1989, the Nikkei index surged to nearly 39,000 points, its highest level in history. At the peak of the bubble, there was even a famous claim that the land value of Tokyo alone exceeded the value of all land in the United States. It was a moment of extreme optimism and extreme risk.
But financial bubbles always follow the same pattern. They grow rapidly, and when they burst, the consequences are devastating. In the early 1990s, the Bank of Japan raised interest rates to cool down the overheated economy. The bubble collapsed.
Stock prices crashed, real estate values plummeted, and enormous amounts of wealth disappeared almost overnight. The collapse left Japanese banks with massive non-performing loans, triggering a long and painful economic slowdown that would later be known as Japan's lost decades.
But something even more unusual happened after the crash. Japan entered a prolonged period of deflation. Instead of rising prices, the economy began experiencing falling prices for years, even decades.
After the trauma of the bubble collapse, Japanese households became extremely cautious. People began saving more and spending less.
And when consumers stop spending, businesses cannot raise prices. Companies begin lowering prices to attract customers. Some even cut wages. Lower wages reduce purchasing power, which reduces consumption even further. This creates a self-reinforcing deflationary cycle.
At the same time, Japan was facing another structural challenge that would reshape its entire economic future: demographics.
Japan has become one of the oldest societies in the world. Nearly 1/3 of Japan's population is now over the age of 65. This demographic shift creates several deep economic consequences. First, the labor force begins to shrink. Fewer young workers are entering the workforce, which slows productivity growth and reduces the economy's long-term expansion potential. Second, government spending rises dramatically. An aging population requires more pensions, healthcare, and long-term care services.
So the system faces a difficult balance. Fewer people are paying taxes, while more people are receiving social benefits.
And aging also changes consumer behavior. Older households tend to spend far more cautiously. Instead of buying houses, cars, or investing in new businesses, they prioritize saving money for retirement and healthcare.
Which weakens domestic consumption even further.
And this leads to another unusual phenomenon in Japan's economy: zombie companies. These are companies that continue operating mainly because interest rates remain extremely low, and banks prefer not to recognize their bad loans. They survive, but they contribute little innovation or productivity growth.
Given all these challenges, deflation, demographic decline, and weak consumption, many analysts once predicted Japan would eventually collapse under its enormous debt. But that never happened.
The reason lies in a powerful structural factor known as the Net International Investment Position, or NIIP. For decades, Japan has remained the largest net creditor nation in the world.
Japanese investors hold vast assets abroad, far more than foreigners hold within Japan. These overseas assets function like a massive financial shock absorber. Even if Japan's domestic debt appears enormous, the country still possesses immense wealth outside its borders.
Part of that wealth comes from Japan being one of the largest holders of U.S. Treasury bonds, with holdings of roughly $1.2 trillion. These global investments generate steady income streams that help stabilize the broader financial system.
When we compare Japan with other major economies, the differences become clear. The United States can sustain large deficits because the US dollar serves as the world's reserve currency. China relies heavily on rapid industrial expansion and export-driven growth. Japan, however, operates under a very different economic model.
Japan relies on stability, savings, and global investment income. Instead of competing with China in mass production industries, Japan has shifted toward advanced materials, precision machinery, robotics, and high-technology industrial components. These are specialized sectors where Japan still maintains a powerful technological advantage.
Over time, Japan has become deeply integrated into the global financial system centered around the US dollar. If Japan were to suddenly sell large portions of its overseas assets, global markets could experience severe instability. But if US monetary policy changes, Japan must adapt as well.
This delicate balance makes economic reform extremely complex. Every policy move must be gradual and carefully calibrated. Japan cannot afford sudden shocks.
And that brings us back to the central paradox. Japan is no longer the rapidly expanding economic miracle it once was, yet it is also far from collapsing.
Its stability rests on three powerful pillars: massive domestic savings, enormous global financial assets, and cautious long-term policymaking. Which is why many economists describe Japan as the economy that doesn't grow but doesn't fall.
If you enjoyed today's discussion, you can explore the full analysis at herothailand.com.
Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to explore the full analysis, you can visit our website at herothailand.com.
Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next episode of Hero Insight.